temporary host here, by the way. So, anyways, I want to present Paul here. He is going to talk to you about Jamf as a center core of the K-12 environment. So, enjoy.
Hello, welcome. This is my first JNUC physically, and I thought it would be a good time to start and do a session myself. So, welcome again. My name is Paul Anello. I am the network administrator for the K-12 School District. I am married. I have 4 kids, and I have a wife that are all home. And my wife is dealing with all of my kids this week, which is amazing. I oversee the day-to-day operations of the network management and our main Jamf deployment for the Katona-Lewisboro School District. I began in Katona in 2018 with a bunch of iPad 2s. Our Jamf was very minimalistic. We had just enrolled a bunch of iPad 2s, had nothing really good at that time, and weren't doing very much in the K-12 space. So we rebuilt the environment from the ground up. Not only have we rebuilt the Office 365 environment, the Jamf environment, our network environment, we started from the ground up. I was tasked with building a network completely from scratch, because what we had was a mess. Our students weren't able to really use our iPad devices and our iOS devices. So we've gone through, we've cleaned all that up. What we've done in Katona, we've rebuilt our existing infrastructure. We redid all of our iOS devices. I think it was in 2019, right before we had gone out in quarantine, we had started doing a one-to-one deployment for 2 to 3 grade levels in our district. And it was COVID that then turned the entire roadmap of the Katona-Lewisboro School District from a non-one-to-one deployment to a complete one-to-one deployment. We were sending out devices with zero touch configured on them all from our warehouse as we were receiving them, because we had some monies come in at the end of the year, and we purchased a ton of devices. And we're able to send those out to our students and families that needed additional devices in the school district for remote learning for the beginning and end of the 2020 school year. This is basically, we had come in and started, this is after we had started. We built an old deployment method. We were binding all of our MacBooks. All of our iPads were through very basic enrollment. We were doing a pre-stage enrollment. We weren't doing pre-stage enrollment. We weren't doing zero-touch deployment yet. We had Mac labs, I think about 3 or 4 of them. In addition, in our classrooms, you can see my enrollment process with the configurator carts. I had 3 configurator carts doing 30 or so iPads at a time. We have now moved to completely reset that. We don't do binding of our Macs anymore. So from Jamf Protect, we excuse me. So we do Jamf. We're a 3-way Jamf shop: Jamf Protect, Jamf Pro, Jamf Connect. We're using Azure for our IDP, and we have completely changed the way we log into our devices and manage our devices. Late in 2018, we started with a small pilot group of teachers doing a one-to-one MacBook Pro deployment, originally bound to Active Directory, which is the bane of doing our MacBooks. After that pilot, we moved to a full deployment of teacher one-to-one devices for MacBooks. We put the Apple TVs into all of our classrooms in the, January of 2018. So when we went into quarantine, our teachers were ready. They had all the devices that they needed to teach remotely. They had devices that we could manage remotely. Unfortunately, we couldn't push out packages to them at the beginning because we hadn't moved over to Jamf Cloud yet. We have recently, during COVID, there was some times that we were actually able to upgrade, migrated all of our Jamf instance to Jamf Cloud, and had complete control over remote deployment of applications and devices. In our classrooms before all of this, before we went into a COVID quarantine period, we had Dell desktop presentation machines in every single classroom. Every single classroom. And our deployments for iPads were very minimal. I think we had maybe 4 or 5 iPad carts that would rotate through the buildings, and they weren't very well set up. We migrated everything during the pandemic to zero-touch deployment, utilizing Jamf Connect for all of our macOS devices, made things a million times easier than having to worry about binding to Active Directory, then having users log in, remove the Active Directory. We ran into tons of issues with that. But this Jamf Connect, in its original deployment, made it very, very easy for us to kind of settle ourselves and get everything done very, very well, very, very quickly. Still have some minor issues here and there, but not half as many as we used to with our bound Active Directory devices. Let's see. This is just some of the images of what we had done in our 21-22 deployment. We had the ability to use the zero-touch deployment. And what we did with our zero-touch deployment is we took it from a zero-touch to a kind of a white gloves type of service. So my team of network specialists, as well as my interns, would take all of the devices, open them up out of the boxes. So our students never touched anything really. And they would go through and set up all the devices, basically log in as every user. So utilizing the zero-touch methodology, they would do that, and then the students, when they receive the devices, would already have the device set up, logged into all of their different applications and everything, and be able to move forward from there. After we get the initial setup, the devices wouldn't have names. So we use a tool called Mutt to use the API from Jamf to be able to update all of the names of the devices and make sure that they have the right naming convention for our school district on there. With Jamf, we've expanded and we use Jamf for all of our infrastructure from our macOS deployment to also tie into our emergency systems, such as with Informacast, Azure, and we do use Carousel digital signage as our preferred digital signage vendor, allowing us to connect to everything that we're doing in the classroom to our emergency systems. So like I said, we do use Singlewire as our emergency system for management of lockdowns, 911 dials, and everything along those lines. We're very cloud-based. We've moved not only our Jamf out to Jamf Cloud, but we've also moved our telephone system out to WebEx, our Azure, our IDP out to Azure, and we don't do very much locally anymore. And this gives us the ability to get messaging across to our students very, very simply. And then this is an image of our lockdown system in place here. So when we trigger a lockdown from our Informacast, it actually sends an API call to, or a CAP protocol call to Carousel, which then sends a notification to Jamf via API call, and then sends the screens into a particular channel lockdown. But I'm going to open this up to some questions. Not very too much information, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions on on what we've discussed.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. 1 second. I will go with the mic so everybody can hear.
Oh,
me.
nice.
First, I'm curious to know why the white glove service over the zero touch.
Great question. So I will go into explanation on that. So in 2020, 21, 22, when we came back to school, we had decided we're going to go to zero touch. We're not going to touch anything. We're going to give all the students the devices with nothing done. What we ran into with that from our Mac OS deployment was students were able to skip around and not get managed. So when they came back to school, we ended up having to go through a enrollment process to manage all the devices and make sure everything got back into management. Our iOS deployment wasn't as bad, but some of our parents were not very smart and they logged in with their own Microsoft credentials. And I'm like looking at everything, I'm like, why are there other people logged in here? This isn't a school's IP address or a name address. So yeah, that's why we decided to go a white glove route with the zero touch. And with everything that we've done in our infrastructure, we freed up the time pulling all of these classroom devices out of the classroom to allow for that to be our focus versus resetting up the classrooms after the summer cleanings.
Thank you for that. And last question, what else does Carousel enable? In addition to the emergency lockdown, the emergency announcements, what else does Carousel enable your district to do?
So Carousel in our district, we use it for day-to-day signage. So in my middle school, they have content that they put up in different areas. Additionally, we have my athletics team puts up some stuff outside of our gymnasium. Our high school has different content that they put up than our middle school. Our guidance office has information that they put up and have access to different zones within Carousel that are then populated into other channels within the space. So we have content being cross-contaminated between, and it allows for that communication getting across to our students. And it's super simple, like stupid simple to use.
Pretty recently too. We had it deployed via Apple TV within, 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's one of the niceties about Carousel that we found was we can plug in an Apple TV. If we plug it in via network cable, even if it's not provisioned, not configured, not anything, we plug it in via network cable, we're able to get it online within like 10 minutes. And it is, when we initially rolled out Carousel, we had to enroll each device into the cloud management. Carousel now, from the configuration profile that we put onto the Apple TV devices, directs it to my Carousel and then tells me that I need to add the device and propagates it in automatically. Any other questions?
I got one in the app. So, Alan said, during iPad deployment, you said your interns had logged into all the apps. When they, were there any scripts or tricks that you use to help save of time of automated logins for that?
Great question. No, unfortunately, we didn't have any scripts to do the individual logins. A lot of the applications that we're logging into happily are single sign-on with Azure. So we've tied many of our systems back to Azure, including our Jamf instance, as well as our IDP. We use Azure for pretty much authenticating everything. So Schoology, WebEx, Zoom. We're able to use Azure for everything, so it's pretty much the same credential for every different system. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to script that on our iOS devices.
So I got another one from Connie. How do you use MUD to rename everything? Your school looks exactly like my district. I hate touching each of them using with Apple IDs. Mostly for Find My iPhone, how do you handle that? And last, do you use Apple TV with Carousel or no? So I think that's yes, the last one, but Two questions there.
What was the last one?
The last one was for Find My iPhone, Find My functionality. How you handle that?
Well, right now we don't really handle it other than pinging a device. We actually internally in our network, we will actually use the Wi-Fi SSI, the Wi-Fi BSSID on the device, the Wi-Fi, what is it? The Wi-Fi MAC address on the device, and we'll use our Aruba GreenLake platform to kind of find the device within the building. We're able to narrow it down to pretty much a classroom. When it comes to how we use Mutt for updating all of the device names, we use, I'm using the classic version because I'm only just doing device names, so it's only a single field that I'm looking to update, because most of the other information that we're populating into Jamf is based on our single sign-on. So when we log into the device, it's propagating the username, then that's linking down to Azure and pulling in all of the first name, last name, building, graduation year, which I think I use as my department, and then student status. And then what I'm doing in Mutt is I'm using the single standard CSV file, just being the serial number and the naming convention that I want, and then uploading that right in there and using that API call to upload that.
Cool, thank you. I got another one. You mentioned issue with the unbinding machine from the AD. What are the issues you experienced?
When we ran into what the issues we experienced when we were binding to Active Directory were basically, we'd bind to Active Directory, a device would go off network, so a teacher would take their device home with them, not be able to connect to the Active Directory, something would expire or something along those lines. Their password would change. They weren't able to relog back into that local account. Local account didn't become a mobile account. And Jamf Connect has kind of just made that go away. So we're able to deal with everything just from a Azure portal standpoint versus having to deal with Active Directory and making sure the computer is connected to a domain controller server. And sometimes the linking between the domain controller and the device would disconnect.
Cool. I got one question. You're using Mutt. Why
Yes.
not the preload inventory in Jamf Pro itself?
I never thought about it.
Yeah, just saying. Sorry.
So one of the things that we do is I take all of the devices when we take all of our devices, we get our devices out of the box, we put an asset tag on there, we seal the asset tag in, and we just take an inventory of the serial number and the asset tag, so that we can then upload all of those asset tags into the system. But we don't take, and then I don't know what device is going to go to what user. So I just take a device, set it up, and then that user gets a device.
Okay, thank you.
That's why I don't think we could use the preload at that point, because it's just randomized.
Or use a webhook. Sorry, I don't want to overcomplicate.
No, it's perfectly fine. I can learn too. I am perfectly open to learning.
That's why we're here, right? So that's
Exactly.
JNUC.
Any other questions? Anybody else do anything else with their environment that maybe we could talk about?
So I know a lot of this is kind of geared towards student devices, but for your staff devices, what is your procedure to keep those updated, especially when it comes to staff that may be working year-round, especially when school is out? You mentioned students, it's really easy to do their devices during the summer. How do you approach also keeping the staff devices updated throughout the year?
Yeah, so a lot of our team, we run reports in Jamf. A lot of it is a very manual process right now. With the updates from today's keynote, I feel we're probably going to do some better patch management of that, and tie some more of those the nuances of how Jamf 11 will work into our deployment strategy.
Sorry, I don't know if you already said this, but over the summer, are you collecting student devices, or are you letting them keep them? And if like the reason why or why not you would?
So in the summertime, we let our 8th graders through 12th graders keep their devices. Those are Mac OS devices. So from K to 7, we're all iOS devices. From 8 to 12, we're all Mac OS devices. We let our Mac OS students keep their devices because we're not going to do anything with them over the summer. But from our elementary schools, we've heard, we don't want the devices in the school. We don't want the devices at home. We don't want to deal with this. Can you just take them all back? And we do. So we collect all the devices back. We recase them. We recover them. We potentially completely update them with either a new device or a replacement device, and get everything back to square one for the first day of school. And hilariously, we've set it up so well that myself and my network specialist are able to be here at JNUC the 3rd week of school. This is a blackout period time for me, so it's like super surprising that I was able to get away.
Cool. And I think that's a great point, that you can be here, right? So
Yeah.
long live automation. Any other one have a question? If not, I think you can hit them up anywhere and have a discussion somewhere in the hallway. Anyways, Paul, thank you very much. It's a
Yeah,
really,
definitely.
really nice story. So,
Wonderful.
okay.
Thank you.